Okay, it is 8:32 p.m. It is Monday, February the 17th. Today is President's Day, and welcome to week 2 of Drugs and Crime. And I'm Professor Richard Wright, and I'll be with you for the next hour or so, going over the requirements for week 2 assignment, as well as um, sharing a little bit of information to help you. Okay. All right. So let's share my screen, get started. As you can see, reminder that rubrics are located in each weekly course assignment. And then I discussed the discussion rubric last week. You're going to see the first time for rubrics for this week, because what's going to happen is you're going to discover their written assignments in weeks 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. And then this is the schedule for live lectures. Again, this is the link for live lectures only. Weeks 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 begin tonight, 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. And you will need to provide me a keyword to get points. Recordings are also under the bottom. You can see last week's lecture. If you can't find your link, I did email it to you, but you'll see each week. And at the end of today, you'll see week 2 there. Okay, so let's take a look at week 2 announcement. So this week, we'll talk about the history of legislation regulating drug use and abuse. And I already sent you the PowerPoint for chapters 5 and 8 of the textbook, Drugs, Crime, and Justice. And you're going to complete the activities, regulation of drug precursors, which we're going to talk about, regulation of synthetic drugs, and then we're going to freakonomics of crack dealing, which you're going to find it's kind of humorous, but it's also very real. And so I'm going to share that video with you tonight. And federal drug activity laws. This is a little interactive exercise that I'll show you, and then you're going to work that yourself. The discussion assignment for this week is mandatory drug sentencing for drug-related crimes. Your initial post, of course, will be due tomorrow night, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, and your reply post will be due by Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Finally, be sure to complete the course project. This is your first written assignment. What is heroin? And the quiz. There's a quiz also, which will be timed. You'll have one time to do that. So you want to make sure that you go through the material before you take the quiz. And then finally, we're going to remind you to continue to start strong and finish strong. And you know my motto, adversity springboard success. You know what that is all about. Let's take a look at our course calendar, as we'll do every week. This is where we are here. Again, it gives you a reading assignment that I just shared with you. Tells you the live lecture, which also provides the link again to get to the live lecture that I already shared with you. Your initial post, mandatory sentencing for drug-related crimes, and then your reply post due this Saturday, and then your written assignment course project, which we'll be discussing in a minute in detail, and then your timed quiz. Okay, and that's it for that week. And then we'll be back next Monday the 24th. Notice what happens. Once again, next week will be week 3. We'll be in week 3. And when we finish on the 24th, we'll be at the when we finish on the 1st, we will be at the halfway point because we've covered weeks 1, 2, and 3. And then we'll be heading for the second half. Again, reminding you again, so that you won't say you didn't know, is that your final class is March 20th. March 20th, okay? 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. No, nothing will be accepted after that. Of course, though, during that week, you'll only have the exam and your reply post to be done that day, because your written assignment, the last written assignment that you'll really have, that you will complete, will be for the 15th, and that's your final course project and quiz. All right? Very quick. Very quick. So week 2, assignments. So the first assignment, course project, what is heroin? Now, you're going to make sure that you read the facts that are in this scenario here, where it talks about heroin and Bayer, which some people should be surprised. Yeah, that's the same Bayer, the aspirin people. And then it talks about how it's made, how heroin is made. Now, you're going to conduct research and write a paper, very important, a minimum of 3 pages, double spaced, not single space, double space. You will lose a couple of points if you don't get double space. And discuss the following information. The information about the source of the countries of poppies, processing labs, distribution and trafficking networks, international and domestic, methods of ingesting heroin. There's several methods. We'll talk about that. Effects of heroin on the body and additive qualities of the drug. Efforts by all levels, international, national, and local government and law enforcement to stop the production of poppies, the importation of heroin into the United States, and distribution on the streets. Not only will you have 3 pages minimum, by the way, this will stand for all of these assignments, weeks 3, 4, and 5. Your papers must include at least 3 credible, reliable, notice it says credible, reliable sources. That means it should be cited in your paper, as we discussed last week, and there should be a reference page. All of your references should be cited at least once in your paper. Do not throw me a reference here and there. Citation here and there. Remember what citations are for. Citations provide support to your statements in your papers, and in conducting your research, be sure to rely on credible and reliable sources other than your textbook. Remember, 3 credible, reliable sources, not your textbook. Do not rely on or cite information from Wikipedia. You see that here. You also see that in your rubric, which I'll show you in a minute. And then, as I said, proper citations, the APA form, a cover page, properly formatted, and a reference page. Okay? You will lose points if you don't have this. If you need help with the assignment, remember the CJE 1233 Drugs and Crime Course Guide, which I discussed last week, which I should point out again and show it to you in just a minute. Okay? Make sure you submit your assignments in Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word. Okay? Name, and then it tells you how to do this. Do not provide me with PDF docs. Now, here's how you access the rubric before grading. First of all, it tells you your due date. There's your due date and time right there that I already shared with you. 40 possible points. So the 30 points cover pretty much what I shared with you a few minutes ago. 5 points covered the 3-page minimum and the standards involved. And then finally, this is primarily your APA and your sources as well. Okay? So this is it. What I will do is at the end of each section, I will put a comment. Sometimes it'll be just the first one. If I have a check mark, that means it's all good. That means you satisfied everything in here and here. Of course, if you have a check mark and comments, which you could, that means that if you lose points, I will let you know in the comments below. Okay? So that's the assignment for this week. Let's go back. The discussion assignment, mandatory sentencing for drug-related activity and crimes. So for this week, conduct research to learn more about mandatory sentencing for drug criminal activity. And we're going to talk about why mandatory sentencing for drug-related criminal activity takes place. And then here's a scenario right here that's given. All right, and so you're going to utilize that, and you're going to, in the first post, discuss whether you agree or disagree with the 3-year mandatory sentence for Mary. Okay, and is the mandatory sentence appropriate for the crime? What impact does mandatory sentencing have on prison populations, including caseload for prosecutors? And then in reply post, respond to a student who present a different argument from you regarding Mary's mandatory sentencing. Compare and contrast your arguments and debate the different points. So be sure to include citations in your post to the sources you relied upon for the information. I'm not that dogmatic about it, but it is good. But stay away from using your textbook as much as possible. As much as possible. And then you need help with it. There's your guides, the link for guides to this. But remember, you'll see this in each assignment. You'll see this week again in the module. Then finally, your quiz. It is a timed quiz, 30 minutes. Starts automatically. This test can be saved and resumed at any point until the time has expired. The timer will continue to run if you leave the test. Okay, if you leave the test is due this Sunday, 11:59 p.m. Central, but you can take it anytime. When you click this begin, it's going to begin. The clock's going to start running. And then your live lecture, again, your key phrase will be due Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time for this Sunday. Okay, and I'll give you that today during this lecture. All right, so let's go back, and you'll see what I was talking about. There it is before the assignments, the Drugs and Crime Course Guide, which is a tool that will help you tremendously. You can open this, allow it, and help you find articles again, and things that will help you complete your project. And then there's each week, it leads up to telling you what assistance, reminding you about how to beat test anxiety, consult the Student Success Guide, test taking lab for tips that will help you improve your test taking. Many of you might overlook that, but make sure you do that if you need it. Course project, and consider the library databases, and then ebooks, article databases. These are resources that we have available. And then I periodically provide you with information and details. Okay, all the way here. Remind you about APA, which I've already shared with you. Okay, so you want to take advantage of that. It is a tool that was put in to help you succeed. So now we got about maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes or so of the class left. So I'm going to talk about, first of all, the regulation of drug precursors, synthetic drugs, just share a little bit of federal drug activity, and then I'm going to let you see this video, the freakonomics of crack dealing, crack cocaine. So let's start out by dealing with the regulation of drug precursors. Well, drugs like marijuana, cocaine, and heroin are from plants, methamphetamines, which, by the way, I gave you an article last week that you can utilize as well. And it's cooked. These items are cooked by combining many household products and chemicals, things that would go into your body, particularly the chemical and household cleaning ingredients. Listen to what they really are. Things like paint thinner. Think about that. This is going into your body. Acetone, anhydrous ammonia, iodine crystals, red phosphorus, drain cleaner in your body, battery acid, lithium taken from batteries, and then pseudoephedrine or ephedrine ingredient usually found in cold medicine. Put that, and you're putting this in your body. This is what's used to manufacture and make these things. And what happens is that when these things are cooked, and I do mean they're cooked, literally, mixed, it changes the chemical makeup of the ingredients and creates what we call a rock. That's for crack cocaine. That's how crack cocaine comes about, and it's very inexpensive. And you're going to discover in a few minutes, we talk about how these items that seem to be pretty innocent, if you go buy these things, you might not have a problem. But if you're buying these things in volume and you're buying a number of them, then you'll see what's going to happen in just a few minutes. It's going to be required that you register. So it's simple. I was the village attorney for 4 years in a town called Ford Heights. It's the south suburbs of Chicago. It was known as the crack cocaine capital of the south suburbs. There were many houses that were abandoned houses that were occupied by individuals who were cooking cocaine. And as a result, because of all these various chemicals, there were many explosions and many fires that took place where there was houses that were burned to the ground. Not only those houses, but the houses that were in the vicinity as well. And so it's a pretty dangerous type of activity, okay? And it's highly toxic because of, look about the ingredients. I mean, when you start thinking about battery acid, lithium, and you start thinking about even just the paint thinner without getting into the other ingredients, it is very volatile. And one of the problems that we used to have as law enforcement is that people would be able to take these meth labs and they would assemble them and move on. They can move very fast, and it's manufactured, it says, in crude laboratories, found in cars, trunks of cars, and I said abandoned buildings, and side road ditches. But the most common experiences that I have been is with being found in cars and using abandoned buildings. So what has happened is the government decided that this, and this is a cheap high. And by the way, you should be aware that one of the reasons why the gangs, and we're going to talk about this again today, is became very violent, is the introduction of crack cocaine, because many people in the urban areas could not afford cocaine itself, very expensive, could not afford other drugs, heroin, and the like. Of course, marijuana, you know, they would mix that. They've been for years lacing that, and people would smoke marijuana and they would go on trips. Of course, as we both know, many jurisdictions, including Illinois, I believe Colorado, I believe California, and I think Massachusetts, and just to name a few, are states that have legalized marijuana. But the truth of the matter is that the street marijuana that people were getting would be laced, and they would, think about it, they would soak it in these chemicals and then let it dry, and then you would light that up and smoke that. Very, very, very dangerous to your body. I know how serious it is because of the fact that I have a sister that she died in '94 in her 30s from an overdose of crack cocaine. She had an aneurysm. So I'm really, 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 really tough on that. And I still argue that marijuana is a gateway drug, and that I don't care if you do legalize it, people are still going to have some serious repercussions themselves with it. So I haven't tried it. I've been around people who have done it, but I never don't have to try. I've seen what happened to people, and that's in law enforcement as well as being a defense attorney, as well as being a pastor. I've had to deal with people. I was a youth pastor. I dealt with young people as well. So anyway, to reduce the manufacture of meth, federal and state laws were passed, and limiting the precursors of substance that are used. This is what I was talking about a few minutes ago. Items that I had mentioned above that were used to manufacture this stuff. So Congress passed what we call the Methamphetamine Epidemic Act. And then what it did is required that if you went to the store for non-prescription products containing pseudoephedrine, ephedrine, propylphedrine, that they were placed behind the counter or in a locked cabinet. You could no longer just walk in and buy those things. And you have to show ID and sign a logbook. And these laws keeping record are used to reduce the number of meth labs, but not the manufacturer, as meth labs continue to shift on large scale. So it's one of the things that is done. And then it's interesting that we've reached a stage where we have to take cough syrup and certain kinds of items and regulate that in terms of people buying volumes of it. Okay. So anyway, Mexican drug trafficking organizations have become the primary manufacturer and distributor of methamphetamine to cities across the United States of America, utilizing not just themselves, but using the gangs and so forth. So many states have passed laws restricting the purchase of these items that I told you. And the question that's asked is, do you think that the laws have an impact on meth and related criminal activity? I don't think so. One of the things that you're going to hear me say over and over and over again, that the way that we're going to deal with whatever levels of drugs that we have in the crisis is taking away the audience. So if there's no market for it, this is going to be, you're going to discover in a few minutes about how crack is used by gangs and how they operate it like a business. And you're going to understand that if there are no customers, then the business goes under, like many of the companies. Have you noticed that now many of the stores are going under because of the fact that people are buying on the internet, and they're not coming into the stores as much. Even stores like Walmart are catching it, but some of the others, they could not deal with it. So let's talk about the regulation of synthetic drugs. Synthetic drugs are drugs, as I said, that are manufactured using various chemicals or organic material that is produced to avoid drug regulation laws. And so there's a lot of struggle to deal with these. But see, these synthetic drugs are so many and voluminous, and you could see them. You could go to a lot of mom and pop stores or gas stations, and you'll see these synthetic cannabinoids. So what these synthetic cannabinoids are, compounds that are sold as legal alternatives to marijuana. Now, again, they're going to still be around, but even though you're legalizing marijuana, there are going to be people who will be able to still get these synthetic cannabinoids because there will still be a market for that because the prices are cheaper. And so these synthetic cannabinoids are made in labs, and the ingredients are psychotropic. That's where I put it. They send you on a trip. They send you, get you high out of your mind. And there are many people who have done things. We're going to talk about some of those activities in just a few minutes. But anyway, they're sold under various names like K2 or Spice. And I said in convenience stores, and you can get it also on the internet. If you Google it, you will see what I'm talking about. And they're not created so much here, but they're smuggled into this country. And in some situations, you can't detect these drugs, even if you take a drug screening test or urinalysis, which makes it one of the features that attracts individuals because of the fact that many people have to take drug tests, do drops in order to keep their jobs. Well, these synthetic cannabinoids can't be detected by that. And also individuals who are on probation or parole, one of the requirements is they can't use drugs, and they'll have to take these urinalysis or drug screening. The fact of the matter is, as conditions of their probation or parole, then they are able to get past it. But once again, they're still violating it, and it's problematic. So there are warnings that have been issued by the government telling individuals of the serious problems that can result from utilizing and the effects that it does, like increase your heart rate and blood pressure, can cause you to become unconscious, vomit, have seizures, hallucination, agitation, and anxiety. Basically, send you on a trip, is what we tell people. Be honest with you, talking about synthetic cannabinoids, that's why I don't drink those energy drinks like Monster and Red Bull and those, just because they will increase your heart rate and blood pressure as well. I've seen people who actually literally die from drinking those. So I don't, anything that has those type of activities, energy things, I'm not going to do it. But anyway, I'm digressing here. But the fact of the matter is, synthetic drugs are very, 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 very dangerous. And you see some pictures in the pictures here. They look tasty. They will even look tasty to innocent parties and kids. So what has happened is that once again we passed some laws called the Synthetic Drug Prevention Act, which permanently places 26 these type of cannabinoids and cathones into Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act, which you learned about last week. And then 43 of the states have taken action to control one or more synthetic cannabinoid. So it's really something. Since prior to 2010, synthetic cannabinoids were not controlled by state or at the federal level, and at least 44 states have taken action to control one or more of these. So again, we are in a heroin epidemic, which we're going to talk about, which not so much has much to do with these things, but you're going to discover that with heroin is kind of taking the front from these synthetic cannabinoids. Finally, we're going to talk about bath salts. This is just another type of thing. It is not something that you take a bath with. It's a family of drugs that, again, can send you on a trip. There's no medicinal purpose at all in these, and they are used as plant food or air freshener in order to trick individuals into thinking the drugs are mild. Bath salts, sniffing or snorting, and result in, as they say, a temporary high, or it can be taken orally or smoked as well. But the most common way is sniffing or snorting, and result in agitation, insomnia, and instability, irritability, just all these different things, paranoia, suicidal thoughts actually have resulted in suicide, seizures, panic attacks. And so, again, some of the same problems we talked about involving these recreational cannabinoids, rapid heart rate, chest pains, nosebleeds, sweating, nausea, and vomiting. And so look at what happened with bath salts. There was a highly publicized incident in 2012 that took place in Miami called the zombie attack, where a naked man high on bath salts chewed on the face of a homeless man in an attack before he was shot by a local police officer. And there have been many other zombie-type attacks throughout the country that have been attributed to bath salts as well. So in 2011, the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, published a register exercising its scheduling authority to control 3 synthetic stimulants that are used to make bath salts. Methadone 3,4, oxyprovolone, MDPV, and methadone. And these actions are used to try to, again, control bath salts. Notice they could take things that you use to make it to try to control it. Finally, as lawmakers attempt to keep up with the chemical aspects, synthetic cannabinoids overseas are manufacturing them, and they stay ahead of the laws themselves. So finally, one of the key things is education of what these drug laws are about and what drugs will do. And in 2014, the Senate passed a resolution designating the week of March 9th through 15th as National Youth Synthetic Drug Awareness Week. And you'll find that there are many young people who keep these things to themselves. They've been found in, parents have checked the bedrooms and found these things under pillows, in drawers, all kinds of places, in their closets, and those kind of things. So before we talk about pre-economics of crack dealing, this is what I was going to tell you. You're going to do this little exercise yourself. First federal law to regulate psychoactive drugs, imposing a tax on opium and cocaine. You'll discover all this in your reading, and you put your answer, and then you do the next one. So you can go through and do those exercises on your own. So now I'm going to take off my headset, and I'm going to it is very interesting. And one of the first things I'm going to do is stop my video, okay, so that you won't be disturbed or sidetracked. I'll bring it back on. Okay, there we go. So now let's go to this. This is about 21 minutes or so. Okay, so it's very interesting. So take time, listen very carefully.
You'll be happy to know that I'll be talking not about my own tragedy, but other people's tragedy. It's a lot easier to be lighthearted about other people's tragedy than your own. I don't want to keep in the spirit of comedy. So if you believe the media account, being a drug dealer in the height of the crack cocaine epidemic was a very glamorous life, in the words of Virginia Pastel. There was money, there was drugs, guns, women, you name it, jewelry, bling bling. It had it all. Okay. What I'm going to tell you today is that, in fact, based on 10 years of research, the unique opportunity to go inside a gang, to see the actual books, the financial records of the gang, that the answer turns out not to be that being in the gang was a glamorous life, but I think more realistically, that being in a gang, selling drugs for a gang, is perhaps the worst job in all of America. And that's what I'd like to convince you of today. Okay, so there are 3 things I want to do. First, I want to explain how and why crack cocaine had such a profound influence on inner city gangs. Secondly, I want to tell you how somebody like me came to be able to see the inner workings of a gang. An interesting story, I think. And then third, I want to tell you in a very superficial way about some of the things we found when we actually got to look at the financial records, the books of the gang. Okay, but before I do that, just one warning, which is that this presentation has been rated R by the Motion Picture Association of America. It contains adult themes, adult language. Given who's up on the stage, you'll be delighted to know that, in fact, there'll be no nudity barring a unexpected wardrobe malfunction aside. Okay, so let me start by talking about crack cocaine and how it transformed the gang. Okay, and to do that, you have to actually go back to a time before crack cocaine in the early 80s. Look at it from the perspective of a gang leader. Okay, so being a gang leader in the inner city wasn't such a bad deal in the mid-80s, the early 80s, I would say. Now, you had a lot of power, you got to beat people up, you got a lot of prestige, a lot of respect. But the thing is, there was no money in it. Okay? The gang had no way to make money. You couldn't charge dues to the people in the gang because the people in the gang didn't have any money. Couldn't really make any money selling marijuana. Marijuana's too cheap, it turns out. Just no market for being. You can't get rich selling marijuana. You couldn't sell cocaine. So cocaine's a great product, powder cocaine. You got to know rich white people. And most of the inner city gang members didn't know any rich white people. They couldn't sell that to the market. You couldn't leave petty crime either. Just a petty crime is a terrible way to do it. So as a result, as a gang leader, you had, power, it's a pretty good life. But the thing was, in the end, you were living at home with your mother. And so it wasn't really a career. It was something, there were limits to how powerful and important you could be if you had to live at home with your mother. Okay. Then along comes crack cocaine. Okay. And in the words of Malcolm Gladwell, crack cocaine was the extra chunky version of tomato sauce for the inner city. Okay? Because crack cocaine was an unbelievable innovation. I don't have time to talk about it today. But if you think about it, I would say that in the last 25 years, of every invention or innovation that's occurred in this country, the biggest one in terms of impact on well-being of people who live in the inner city was crack cocaine. Okay, it's for the worse, not for the better, for the worse. It had a huge impact on life. So what was it about crack cocaine? It was a brilliant way of getting the brain high. Okay, because you could smoke crack cocaine, and you can smoke crack cocaine, you can't smoke powder cocaine, and smoking is a much more efficient mechanism for delivering a high than is snorting it. And it turned out there was this audience that didn't know it wanted crack cocaine, but when it came, it really did. And it was a perfect drug you could sell for, buy the cocaine that went in for $1, sell it for $5, highly addictive. The high was very short. So for 15 minutes, you get this great high. And then when you come down, all you want to do is get high again. It created a wonderful market. And for the people who were there running the gang, it was a great way, seemingly, to make a lot of money. At least for the people at the time. Okay, so this is where we enter the picture. Not really me. I'm really a bit player in all this. My co-author, Sudhir Venkatesh, is the main character. Okay? So he was a math major in college who had a good heart, decided he wanted to be get a sociology PhD, came to the University of Chicago. So the 3 months before he came to Chicago, he had spent following the Grateful Dead. And in his own words, he looked like a freak. Okay? He's a South Asian, very dark-skinned South Asian, big man, and he had hair, in his words, down to his ass. Okay? Defied all kinds of boundaries. Was he black or white? Was he man or woman? It was really a curious sight to be seen. So he showed up at the University of Chicago, and the famous sociologist William Julius Wilson was doing a book that involved surveying people all across Chicago. And he took one look at Sudhir, who was going to go do some surveys for him, and decided he knew exactly the place to send him, which was most housing projects, and not just Chicago, but the United States. So Sudhir, never really took the word, and walks down to this housing project, gets to the first building. First building, well, there's nobody there, but he hears some voices up in the stairwell. So he climbs up the stairwell and comes around the corner and finds a group of young African American men playing dice. Okay. This is about 1990, peak of the crack epidemic. This is a very dangerous job being in a gang. You don't like to be surprised. You don't like to be surprised by people come around the corner, and the mantra was shoot first, ask questions later. Okay. Now Sudhir was lucky. He was such a freak, and that clipboard probably saved his life because he figured no other rival gang member would be coming up to shoot at him with a clipboard. So his reading was not particularly warm, but they did say, well, okay, let's hear your question on your survey. So I kid you not, the first question on the survey that he was sent at was, how do you feel about being lower class? Makes you wonder about academics. Okay. Well, so the choice of answers was very good. What Sadir found out is, in fact, that the real answer was the following. The survey was not, in the end, going to be what got Sadir off the hook. He was held hostage overnight in the stairwell. There was a lot of gunfire. There were a lot of philosophical discussions he had with the gang members. By morning, the gang leader arrived, checked out Sadir, decided he wasn't no threat, and they let him go home. So Sadir went home, took a shower, took a nap, and you and I, probably faced with a situation, would think, well, I guess I'm going to write my dissertation on the Grateful Dead after following the last 2 months. Sadir, on the other hand, got right back, walked down to the housing project, went up to the second floor, and said, hey guys, I had so much fun hanging out with you last night. I wonder if I could do it again tonight. And that was the beginning, what turned out to be a beautiful relationship that involved Sadir living in the housing project on and off for 10 years, hanging out in crack houses, going to jail with the gang members, having the car window shot out of his car, having the police break into his apartment, steal his computer disks, you name it. But ultimately, the story has a happy ending for Sadir, who became one of the most respected sociologists in the country. And especially for me, as I sat in my office with my Excel spreadsheet open, waiting for Sadir to come and deliver to me the latest load of data that he would get from the gang. It's one of the most unequal co-authoring relationships ever. But I was glad to be the beneficiary. Okay. So what do we find? What do we find in the gang? Well, let me say one thing. So what we really got access to everybody in the gang. We were we got an inside look at the gang from the very bottom up to the very top. They trusted Sadir in ways that really no academics have ever, or really anybody, any outsider has ever earned the trust of these gangs. To the point where they actually opened up what was most interesting for me is their books, their financial records that they got, and they made them available to us. You don't have to say them, but we could ask them questions about what was it. So if I have to kind of summarize very quickly in the short time I have, what the sort of the bottom line of what I take away from the gang is that if I had to draw a parallel between the gang and any other organization, it would be that the gang is just like McDonald's, okay, in a lot of different respects, the restaurant McDonald's. Okay, so first, in one way, which isn't maybe the most interesting way, but it's a good way to start, is in the way it's organized, the hierarchy of gang, the way it looks. So here's what the org chart of the gang looks like. I don't know if any of you know very much about org charts, but if you were to kind of strip down and simplify McDonald's org chart, this is exactly what the org chart would look like. Now, it's amazing, but the top level of the gang, they actually call themselves the board of directors. Okay, and as Sadir says, it's not like a very sophisticated kind of view of like what happened in American corporate life, but they had seen movies like Wall Street, and they kind of had learned like a little bit about what it was like to be in the real world. Now, below that board of directors, you've got the essentially what are regional VPs, people who control the south side of Chicago, the west side of Chicago. Now, Sadir got to know very well the guy who had the unfortunate assignment of trying to take the Iowa franchise, which it turned out for this black gang was not one of the more brilliant financial endeavors that they undertook. Okay. The thing that really makes the gang seem like McDonald's is this franchise. That the guys who are running, the local gangs, the 4 square block by 4 square block areas, they're just like the guys in some sense who are running the McDonald's. They are the entrepreneurs. They get the exclusive property rights to control the drug selling. They get the name of the gang behind them for merchandising and marketing. And they're the ones who basically make the profit or lose the profit depending on how good they are at running the business. Now, the group I really want you to think about, though, are the ones at the bottom, the foot soldiers. Okay, these are the teenagers typically who'd be standing out on the street corners selling the drugs. Extremely dangerous work. And important to note that almost all of the weight, all of the people in this organization are at the bottom. Okay, just like McDonald's. So in some sense, the foot soldiers are a lot like the people who are taking the order at McDonald's. And it's not just by chance they're like them. In fact, in these neighborhoods, they'd be the same people. So the same kids who were working in the gang were actually, at the very same time, they would typically be working part-time at a place like McDonald's. Okay, which already, I think, foreshadows the main result that I've talked about what a crappy job it was being in the gang. Because obviously, if being in the gang was such a wonderful, lucrative job, why in the world were these guys in moonlight at McDonald's? Okay, so what do the wages look like? Now, you might be surprised, but based on the actual, being able to talk to them and to see their records, this is what it looks like in terms of the wages. The hourly wage the foot soldiers were earning was $3.50 an hour. It was below the minimum wage. And this is well documented. It's easy to see by the patterns of consumption they have. It really is not fiction, it's fact. There was very little money in the gang, especially at the bottom. Now, if you manage to rise up, say, and be that local leader, the guy who's equivalent to the McDonald's franchisee, you'd be making $100,000 a year. And that, in some ways, was the best job you could hope to get if you were growing up in one of these neighborhoods as a young black male. If you manage to rise to the very top, $200,000 or $400,000 a year is what you'd hope to make. Truly, you will be a great success story. One of the sad parts of this is that, indeed, among the many other ramifications of crack cocaine, is that the most talented individuals in these communities, this is what they were striving for. They weren't trying to make it in legitimate ways because there were no legitimate channels out. This was the best way out. And it actually was the right choice, probably, to try to make it out this way. You look at this, the relationship with McDonald's breaks down here. The money looks about the same. Why is it such a bad job? Well, the reason it's such a bad job is that there's somebody shooting at you a lot of the time. Okay? So they're shooting at you. What are the death rates? Okay? We found in our gang, and admittedly, this was not really sort of a standard situation. This was a game of a time of intense violence, of a lot of gang wars. This gang actually became quite successful, but there were costs. And so the death rate, not to mention the rate of being arrested, sent to prison, being wounded, the death rate in our sample was 7% per person per year. You're in the gang for 4 years, you expect to die with about a 25% likelihood. Okay? That is about as high as you can get. So just for comparison's purposes, let's think about some other walk of life where you may expect might be extremely risky. Like let's say that you were a murderer and you were convicted of murder and you're sent to death row. Turns out the death rates on death row from all causes including execution, 2% a year. Okay? So it's a lot safer being on death row than it is selling drugs out on the street. Okay? That makes you pause, gives you some pause, those of you who believe that the death penalty is going to have an enormous deterrent effect on crime. Now, to give you a sense of just how bad the inner city was during crack, and I'm not really focusing on the negatives, but really there's another story to tell you there. If you look at the death rates just of random young black males growing up in the inner city of the United States, the death rates during crack were about 1%. That's extremely high. This is violent death. It's unbelievable in some sense. Put it into perspective, if you compare this to the soldiers in Iraq, for instance, right now, fighting the war, 0.5%. So in some very literal way, the young black men who were growing up in this country were living in a war zone, very much in the sense of the way that the soldiers over in Iraq are fighting a war. Okay, so why in the world, you might ask, would anybody be willing to stand out on the street corner selling drugs for $3.50 an hour with a 25% chance of dying over the next 4 years? Why would they do that? Okay? And I think there are a couple answers. I think the first one is that they got fooled by history. It used to be the gang with a rite of passage, that the young people controlled the gang, that as you got older, you dropped out of the gang. Okay? So what happened was the people who happened to be in the right place at the right time, people who happened to be leading the gang in the mid to late 80s, became very, very wealthy. And so the logical thing to think was that, well, the next generation, so they're going to age out of the game like everybody else has, and the next generation is going to take over and get the wealth. Okay? So there's striking similarities, I think, to the internet boom. Right? The first set of people in Silicon Valley got very, very rich. Then all my friends said, maybe I should go do that too. And they were very cheap for stock options that never came. Okay? In some sense, that's what happened exactly to the set of people we were looking at, is that they were willing to start at the bottom, just like, say, a lawyer at a law firm, a first-year lawyer is willing to start at the bottom, work 80-hour weeks for not that much money, because they think they're going to make partner. But what happened was the rules changed, and they never got to make partner. Indeed, the same people who were running all of the major gangs in the late 1980s are still running the major gangs in Chicago today. They never passed on any of the wealth. So everybody got stuck at that $3.50 an hour job, and it turned out to be a disaster. The other thing the gang was very, very good at was marketing and trickery. And so, for instance, one thing the gang would do is, the gang leaders would have big entourage, and they drive fancy cars, and they have fancy jewelry. So what Segura eventually realized, as he hung out with them more, is that really they didn't own those cars; they just leased them because they couldn't afford to own the fancy cars, and they didn't really have gold jewelry; they had gold-plated jewelry. So it's back to the real versus the fake real, and really. They did all sorts of things to trick the young people into thinking what a great deal the game was going to be. So, for instance, they would give a 14-year-old kid, they'd give him a whole, roll of bills to hold. That 14-year-old kid would say, oh, well, he would say to his friends, hey, look at all the money I got in the game. It wasn't his money until he spent it, and then essentially he was in debt to the gang, was sort of an indentured servant for a while. Okay, so I have a couple minutes. Let me do one other thing I thought I'd have time to do, which is to talk about what we learn more generally about economics from the study of the game. Okay? So economists tend to talk in technical words. Often our theories fail quite miserably when we go to the data. But actually what's kind of interesting is that in this setting, it turns out that some of the economic theories that worked not so well in the real economy work very well in the drug economy. In some sense, the theory that done better capitalism. Here's an economic principle. This is one of the basic ideas in labor economics. It's called a compensating differential. It's the idea that basically the increment of wages that a worker requires to leave them indifferent between performing two tasks, one which is more pleasant than the other, that's what you call a compensating differential. That's why we think garbage men might be paid more than people who work in cars. Okay? So, in the words of the gang, one of the members of the gang, I think, makes this clear. So it turns out, I'm sort of getting ahead of myself, it turns out in the gang, when there's a war going on, that they actually pay the foot soldiers twice as much money. Okay, it's exactly this concept, because they're not willing to be at risk. So here's in the words of a gang member, it quite nicely. It says, would you stand around here when all this shit, I mean shooting, if all this shit's going on? No, right. So if I'm going to be asked to put my life on the line, then cut me the cash, man. So essentially, I think the gang member says it much more articulately than does the economist about what's going on. Here's another one. So economists talk about game theory, that every two-person game has an executor. Here's the translation you get from the gang member. They're talking about the decision of why they don't go shoot. One thing that turns out to be a great business tactic in the gang is to go and just shoot in the air, just shoot guns in the other gang's territory. All the people are afraid to go by the guns there, they're going to come at your neighbor. But here's what he says about why they don't do that. He says, if we start shooting around there in the other gang's territory, nobody, and I mean you dig it, nobody's going to step on the turf. But we got to be careful, because they can shoot around here too, and then we all fucked. Okay? So that's exactly the same concept. But then again, sometimes economists get it wrong. So one thing we observed in the data is that it looked like, in terms of the gang leader always got paid. Okay? He always, no matter how bad it was economically, he always got himself paid. So we had some theories related to cash flow and lack of access to capital markets and things like that. And then we asked the gang member, well, why did you always get paid? Your workers don't always get paid. His response is, you got all these niggers below you who want your job, you dig? If you start taking losses, the team was weak and shit. Okay? I thought about it. I said, CEOs often pay themselves million-dollar bonuses even when companies are losing a lot of money. And it never would really occur to economists that this idea of weak and shit could really be important. So maybe weak and shit is an important hypothesis. Thank you very much.
Turn back on my video, and as you could see, this video is quite detailed. One of the things that you should be aware of is that he didn't talk too much about, but he did kind of touch on it, was the shooting part. And with the advent of crack cocaine to protect the territories, there came the need for weapons, and now They got semi-automatic, even some automatic weapons. And then you got all these dudes running around shooting at people who are really their competition or those kinds of things, eliminating the competition, or individuals who are trying to take over their territories, and they're not shooting straight. So guess who's getting killed? Innocent people in the hood. But the key thing that you need to be aware of is that crack dealing, that's why it became such a big business. And these individuals, they would take that money and they would put in legitimate businesses, and they would continue to make residual. They would place one of their family members over maybe one of their kids, or a close family member over it, to be able to keep things going. And so it was very, very dangerous. So you should be aware of the fact that as we started out talking about dealing with cocaine, and I was talking about the manufacturer of it. Remember, these individuals, they didn't manufacture it. What they did was distribute it that had been previously manufactured. And like the money would find themselves all the way to the top. And those were the people who would, make all the money. And instead, individuals who were out there on the front line, out there sacrificing their lives, and many of the people that I represented as a lawyer, when I represented individuals who were dealers, were not the big dealers, but were individuals who held large quantities of these drugs for distribution and sale, but they were really the ones who were out there on the streets. And they were kind of like, I don't know much about chess, but I do know that if you're a pawn, that you get sacrificed. And so these foot soldiers were individuals who were out there. So it continues on. When you see the people that you see selling drugs, these are the people that they are talking about right there. And it is very interesting that they actually did keep books themselves, showing how much money they made and things like that. Really, really something. So, well, that's what I wanted to share with you today. I want to give you a phrase, and the substance of crack cocaine. That's it. So crack cocaine. Give me that as your keyword to get your points for this week. I will see you next week. If you have any questions about your assignments, I kind of laid them out so that you can understand what needs to be done. So I will see you next week, same time, roughly 8:30 to 9:30. So good night.